Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
Growing more with less is the mantra of Nebraska's corn farmers, and they're using incredible technology to do it. Soil moisture monitors let them know when their crop needs water and how much. GPS systems eliminate overlaps in the field, saving fuel and money. New hybrids reduce the use of pesticides and increase yields. When you're talking new technology and innovation, Nebraska corn farmers are all ears. Nebraska's family corn farmers, sustaining innovation.
Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, Roy Smith looks at the dead cat bounce in corn and soybeans. Charles Shapiro talks about fall nitrogen applications. Laura Thompson discusses the Nebraska On-Farm Research Network. And Rick Rasby explains how producers with limited grass resources can dry lot cows. Roy Smith is our corn and soybean market analyst this week. Compared with September, the USDA is expecting smaller crops this harvest. In its October crop report, the agency lowered harvested acres and production estimates for both corn and soybeans. Average yields in Nebraska were unchanged from September, 184 bushels per acre in corn and a nation-leading 56 bushels per acre in soybeans. Roy is currently tracking the dead cat bounce in corn and soybeans. As he recently wrote on agriculture.com, his analysis shows the harvest low in cash soybeans took place September 22nd at $7.87 a bushel. We talked with Roy Wednesday afternoon about the bounce, but we started by asking for a harvest update in his area of southeast Nebraska.
Harvest doing real well here in Cass County. I'd say beans are probably half to 60% done. Not very much of the corn is done because everybody is pushing to get the beans done while the weather's still so nice.
Should I anticipate that you didn't pay much attention to the October crop report on Friday?
Well, this time of the year the crop reports never bother me too much. I know everybody looks at them, all the market analysts get all excited about them, but you know what I'm going to say that I'm watching, and that's the dead cat bounce. And we're early in the season for that, so my thinking is that that's going to be the thing to watch here in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Update me on the dead cat bounce progress in soybeans.
Soybean market, dead cat bounce, normally we look for 15 trading days higher than the harvest low and at least 35 cents to 50 cents a bushel off of that low. Now with bean prices in the neighborhood of $8, I really expect a little more than 35 cents. I really expect somewhere between 60 cents and $1. There for a while I was starting to wonder if this was going to be the year when that didn't work, and then Friday of this week we saw a really strong soybean market. Nearby November beans were 25 higher. And
Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, Tuesday 25 higher, and boy, that really all at once made it look like, hey, the dead cat bounce is real. We got our 50 cents a bushel over a harvest low. We got 15 trading days over the harvest low. So there it is. And now everybody wants to know, well, when do I sell? Now that's a lot harder question to ask.
Because?
Well, it's just that there aren't any specific hard and fast rules on this dead cat bounce as to how high it's going to go. I always think it's going to be at least 35 cents. Well, this year it went from less than 35 to 35 to 50 all in one jump. And that isn't all that unusual. There have been 3 or 4 years in the late 80s, early 90s when we saw a big crop coming. Everybody's pessimistic about it, and all at once the market jumped 50 cents or 75 cents. So I'm not giving up on the dead cat bounce. We've already met the two big criteria, and that is the number of days, 15 days, and 50 cents a bushel or more over the harvest low.
So are you saying that you're looking for a specific price, or you're just not ready to pull the trigger yet?
I think it's a little early to pull the trigger. I'm not looking for a specific price, but I will say something over 50 cents a bushel it's going to take to make me think that we're getting close to the end. 15 trading days, I would like to see a little longer rally than that. I mean, when you look back at the charts, 15-cent rally after the price goes down $10 doesn't amount to a lot. So we need to look for some kind of a technical signal, key reversal, graphs or whatever to pull that trigger to make those sales.
How does the soybean market compare with the market in corn?
You know, the market in corn has been just, for the most part, almost the direct opposite, almost a mirror image of the soybean market. And that's pretty disappointing, because that means that we really haven't had a nice rally in the corn market yet. We had one back in July. You know, hopefully some people got corn sold in, but since then it's been more or less in a trading range, just like soybeans have.
What would be the indication that you're looking for some sales here in the future?
Well, first of all, the biggest thing is that in the dead cat bounce, we almost always get an improvement in the basis, and we absolutely haven't seen any movement in the basis here in eastern Nebraska. So that's kind of disappointing, but still it indicates that there could be some price movement ahead that will give us that chance. And you know, I guess when I look at the prices and the charts and everything, I think that we've had 50-cent improvement in futures price. If we get 20 cents a bushel improvement in basis, so the net was 70 altogether, that would cause me to seriously look at selling something.
Your focus is going to be more so on basis as we go forward rather than the futures price.
Well, no, I didn't say that. I think the futures price has always got to be first. However, I also want there to be an improvement in the basis, simply from the standpoint that it will indicate to me that this is real.
Next week, Jeff Peterson from Heartland Farm Partners will give us his thoughts on corn and soybean markets. Nebraska's corn harvest advanced 11 points and soybean harvest progressed 26 points last week. Both are still behind completion compared to the state's 5-year average. However, the 5-day quantitative precipitation forecast from the National Weather Service indicates combines should roll over the weekend. As of Thursday morning, the map indicated next to dry conditions across Nebraska. If growers do make good progress with favorable weather, some may think about applying nitrogen. But with soil temperatures at 4-inch depth ranging from the mid-50s in the Panhandle to the mid-60s in southeast Nebraska, Nebraska Extension soil scientist Charles Shapiro says the threat of losing nitrogen is high. We talked with Charles earlier this week about how to minimize the risks associated with fall nitrogen applications.
Well, the reason it's a good idea is they might have the time, and prices of the fertilizer might suit them. There might be some tax advantages. From the agronomic soils point of view, you're putting your N out at risk, and so there are certain conditions that we don't recommend putting out the fall anhydrous, and that would be any coarse textured soil, any place where there might be leaching. Those are the two main things. And then of course in our state with the natural resource districts, there may be particular fields that are in one of those phases which have further restriction on fall application.
How does soil temperature come into play?
The process, the biological process that converts the anhydrous ammonia to nitrate is mitigated or is driven by temperature and bacteria. So the warmer it is, the faster that occurs. So the idea, which has been around a long time, is that soil temp should be below 50 degrees and stay below 50 degrees. And that'll give enough time to get us into the winter when the temperature will get even lower and nitrification will essentially stop. So nitrification is going on at 50 degrees, but when it gets down to 35, it's going to be stopped. So you want the anhydrous ammonia to be in the ammonia form through the winter. If we get it Indian summer and it warms up and it converts, that's when it can be leached and lost.
Meaning that you might have to wait a little bit if you're going to do it for the soils to come down.
Right. The problem would be if it goes to 50 for a week, you put on the N, and then we have a lot of warm weather and it gets warmer. The problem with anhydrous ammonia as we wait longer and longer into the fall is that for most of the anhydrous applicators, it has to be warm out because it's the warm temperature that pushes the anhydrous through the knives. And if we have a big applicator, it needs more flow. So as we get later and later into the season, there's less and less time to put that anhydrous out.
What impact could a saturated soil have?
Actually, if it's very wet, you're not going to get the nitrification because you need oxygen. But you don't really want to be pulling the knife through a wet soil. So maybe if you have a dry soil, you put the anhydrous on, you get a rain, and it gets saturated. That could be good, but that means you might get more leaching the next time you get rain. So it's much better to wait until the crop needs it to put the N on. That's really what all the research is headed towards, and sensors and grid sampling. It's all about fine-tuning the N for what the crop needs.
If you do it this fall, like you talked about at the beginning, there are some potential advantages in a specific operation. Which fields would be the best to do it in, and what form, depth, things like that?
Well, we'd want to put it on fields that don't have the possibility of leaching too much. So this would be your finer textured soils. You don't want to have it in places where the N could leach in the following year or in the spring. So if it got warm and then it stayed wet and had too much rain, you could have leaching. So you want probably areas where putting a knife track there, we haven't talked about erosion, but if you're putting a knife track through your field, you might have an erosion problem. So you'd want ground that wasn't erosion prone as well.
Charles also says the use of a nitrification inhibitor with fall anhydrous ammonia will slow the conversion process and reduce the amount of nitrate produced. The CropWatch website features maps with soil temperatures at 4-inch depth across Nebraska. We'll link to those resources on the Market Journal homepage. The October Nebraska farmer says in the Panhandle, precipitation is usually at a premium. While this season has been unusually wet, farmers in the region know anything they can do to conserve water will help their bottom line. This month's magazine says that's why field peas are such a good fit for Mark and Bruce Watson, who say the crop works well in a rotation with winter wheat. To learn more about the water efficiency and synergy of field peas in a Panhandle rotation, you can check out the October Nebraska Farmer. As farmers go through the field during harvest, they'll likely think about treatments that may or may not have worked during the growing season. As we've told you in the past, through the Nebraska On-Farm Research Network, growers can work with university experts to conduct trials on their operations that will give them reliable results. Earlier this week at the ARDC near Meade, we talked with Nebraska Extension educator Thompson about current studies farmers are doing through the network.
So the On-Farm Research Network is part of Nebraska Extension. It's a group of producers that have been working with Nebraska Extension to evaluate different practices and products on their farm to help them determine if those are going to be profitable decisions for them, if they're going to see an increase in yield or maybe a savings in input costs. So they've been working with Nebraska Extension for 26 years now in some fashion to conduct these research experiments themselves.
So now during harvest, why is it a good time to think about doing some on-farm research on your own operation?
Well, producers are obviously really busy right now with harvest going on, but as you're going through the field, that can be a great time to be thinking, did this product that I applied pay off? Did it help? Kind of evaluating some of those questions. Maybe you applied some extra nitrogen this year. Was there a return for that? So that's a great time to be thinking through those questions and kind of formulating some things that you'd be wanting to experiment with next year. And also right now is a great time. Some of those projects really need to be planned early on. Things like nitrogen experiments or cover crop studies, those are going to have to be implemented a lot earlier. And so you've really got to start getting some ideas and getting going with those.
What are some of the projects that you currently have ongoing with the Nebraska On-Farm Research Network?
Yeah, we've got a lot of studies going on this year. There's over 100 different studies out there. There's a number that are looking at cover crops, several looking at different nitrogen management practices, some evaluating a different model nitrogen management study, looking at maize-in developed at UNL, also looking at crop canopy sensors. That one is called Project Sense. using crop canopy sensors for in-season nitrogen management. We also have some row spacing, planting population, variable rate planting population, fungicide applications, seed treatment. One of those is looking at a new seed treatment for sudden death syndrome. A number of biological products. Out west, they're looking at some field pea research projects. So a huge spectrum of topics that people are interested in and looking at this year.
Why is it so important to work with somebody in the university who can help set you up to make sure that your research is accurate and, I guess, based in science?
Well, you know, you can put a lot of different trials out there yourself, but the power of working with the university and with Nebraska Extension is that we can help make sure that your treatments are laid out, your different products or things you're wanting to look at are laid out in a way that's replicated across the field. We'll have it occur multiple times and then randomize the order that those different products are used so that we can account for things like soil variability, water holding variability, and different things that could really impact the results that you're seeing. Then we have the ability to use statistics to really determine, was that difference really due to what you thought it was, or was there maybe some soil or some other factor coming into play?
Certainly when we talk about the Nebraska On-Farm Research Network, the question I always ask you or ask Keith, how much time does it take for the producer?
Yeah, well, you know, the projects can be as complicated or simple as you want, but really, especially with precision agriculture technology, yield monitoring capabilities, guidance systems, it can be really easy to get lined up for different treatments that you're putting in, and then harvesting can be really simple too with yield monitors. So it takes not much longer than it already takes you in a field in many cases.
If you're interested in doing studies on your farm, you can find more information online at cropwatch.unl.edu/farm research. The Nebraska On-Farm Research Network is sponsored in part by the Nebraska Corn Board. Coming up in November and December, you'll have the opportunity to attend one of 10 workshops across Nebraska about post-harvest grain marketing. The first event is November 5th in Ogallala. Each is free to attend and will run from 9:30 to 3 o'clock. One of the topics will be developing a written marketing plan. Nebraska Extension educator Jessica Groskopf explains why that can be so helpful to an operator.
There's several reasons that having a written marketing plan is very important. First is to combat those emotional sales. I call it the marketing mind game. We all get caught up in this mind game of marketing our grain where, you know, we're waiting for that high price or we're waiting for the next point, and we get stuck there, and then all of a sudden we've held grain too long, we've missed some potential profit, and, you know, then we're just selling grain because we've got to get rid of it. When we have a written grain marketing plan, the first thing that does is it combats that mind game. Instead of comparing today's price to yesterday's price, now we're comparing today's price to our expectation and to our plan. Another reason it's really important is that usually there's not just one person in an operation making decisions. We have spouses and children and brothers and sisters, or even business partners or banks that have some interest in our operation, and having a written grain marketing plan puts everybody on the same page.
At the workshops, producers will develop a marketing plan and then implement the plan in a simulator called Marketing in a New Era. That tool takes grain marketing patterns from previous years, and producers can test their decisions as the year plays out. Again, these post-harvest grain marketing workshops are free to attend and sponsored in part by the Nebraska Corn Board. Registration is limited, though, to the first 40 participants in each location. To register or find more information about cities and towns near you, you can visit go.unl.edu/marketing workshops or find a link through our homepage. Some producers with limited land might find it difficult to maintain a cow-calf enterprise. But Nebraska Extension beef specialist Rick Rasby says dry lotting cows could be a viable option that allows a farmer or rancher to keep their animals. UNL has conducted research on the practice over the past few years. We talked about that with Rick at the ARDC near Meade Wednesday afternoon.
There's a lot of interest in dry lot and beef cows, and I would say probably more eastern Nebraska as compared to maybe further west, if you will. But you know, we were getting questions in regards to you know, how can I maintain my cow herd, especially after we've converted, you know, a lot of acres from pasture and forage ground over to crop ground a number of years ago. And so the idea was that, you know, how can I maintain a cow herd without any grazed resource out there?
What are the logistics for a producer that wants to do this on his or her operation?
You know, I think really from our standpoint, it's been fairly simple. But I think when you think about, incorporating this kind of enterprise in your operation, one thing is that you have to have some space that you can put cows in a dry lot, and the other thing is you want to have enough room. So, I think right now we're right at about 300 square foot per cow-calf pair, and then probably close to 3.5 to 4 foot of bunk space per cow-calf pair.
And are you talking about dry lotting 365 days a year?
We've done that, and it's worked out okay. But, I think as you think about Nebraska, especially eastern Nebraska, the question that we asked ourselves is, can you actually maintain a cow herd without pasture and build that around maybe dry lotting and crop residues? And so right now what we're looking at is actually dry lotting cows for so many months out of the year, and then look at the opportunity to graze corn residue.
Tell me about the diet other than that.
I think if, at least from our perspective, if you get into dry lotting cows, I think you have to buy into a limit-fed diet. And sometimes that might scare producers, but when I say limit-fed in this situation, that means that cows aren't being fed to their capacity, but what they're being fed will meet their requirements. And so that's important, because I think if you full feed them, I think there's some economics against that. And the other thing would be is that as you think about full feeding, you think about more bulky kinds of diets, and you probably have to feed more often as compared to limit-fed diets. So it boils down to economics, but the idea that I want to get across is that we meet their requirements.
And how are you handling the calf in these situations?
The calf, we actually have done some work, because I think we were getting the question, should I early wean the calf, or is it okay to leave the calf on the cow? And so we did some early weaning to look at the efficiency of early weaning versus cows that maintain their calf at their side up to about 205 days of age. And we found out that it was just as efficient to have that calf at that cow side during that time period as compared to early weaning. So if you don't have a place for that calf to go, if you're going to early wean, it's just as efficient to leave those pairs together. Remember, you got to have some bunk space, because interesting enough is that calf's going to come to the bunk at a fairly young age. And so that's the reason why we would say, probably 3.5 to 4 foot of bunk space, because that calf's going to come there. On an early, on a limit-fed diet, it's going to be pretty competitive at the bunk, but that calf's going to eat out of that bunk.
Are there common hurdles that producers have faced, the ones that you're working with, that are moving or transitioning into this kind of operation?
The thing is that one is I think from a management standpoint, you really got to work with your veterinarian to make sure that you have the herd health up to snuff, and really concentrate probably on how you can eliminate scours, and then how you can eliminate or reduce respiratory in this kind of situation.
Rick recently wrote an article detailing his research on dry lotting cows. It can be found on UNL's beef website or on the Market Journal homepage. Now, with this week's weather forecast, here's Nebraska Extension state climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here again for the weekly forecast. During this past week, the two big items of concern were, one, lack of precipitation. In fact, virtually no, if any, precipitation reported statewide or into the Central Plains. And two, the cold air that moved in late in the week. The models last week completely underplayed, brought some freezing temperatures to northern Nebraska, moderate freeze into central Nebraska, and extreme southern Nebraska had some patchy scattered frost. So we haven't had a killing freeze, at least in the southern half of the state, as defined by temperatures at least 28 or below, but we certainly had our first white covering of areas of the grass of the year, and there will be more to come. In fact, the models are advertising a hard freeze event before the month's end for all of the state, probably as we get into late next weekend. But in terms of precipitation, we sure could use some significant moisture across the Central Plains, not only in southern Nebraska, but all the way down into Texas and Oklahoma, where very dry conditions have been pretty much the norm over the last 30 to 45 day period. Now, there are increasing signs that the western United States is going to turn to an active stormy pattern, and that was advertised by the experimental two-week lead forecast that I showed you last week that indicated that wet trend developing in the central and southern plains. That's an extension of the troughs that are starting to build into the western United States. So if we can make it through the next few days, we have the possibility of an increasing moisture chances as we move into the later half of next week, and after that it looks like a very stormy pattern for much of the central and southern plains. So let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we have in store. The cold air that came into the region is now over the northeastern United States, as that northwest flow bringing out the cold air out of Canada remains pretty much over the northeast, and in its wake we have ridging building up into the central plains. And so we are going to see some very nice conditions today. Although a bit cool in the eastern part of the state, we will start to see some warming temperatures up into the 70s across the southwestern sections of the state. And as we go into tomorrow, that ridge will actually expand northward and eastward and bring very nice conditions for Sunday statewide. We'll be looking at low 80s easily in the southwest, with mid to upper 70s, pretty consistent across southeast and east central Nebraska, and probably upper 60s to low 70s across northeast Nebraska. I will draw your attention to this trough in the western United States, and depending on how this system moves out will determine whether or not we get precipitation, at least early next week. Right now the models are splitting that energy and leaving Nebraska kind of in between the systems, but if it comes out as one piece, we'd expect the precip to pick up in earnest as we get into Tuesday. So as we get into Monday, we're going to start to see some of that energy by the models depicted as breaking off into the northern plains, and a piece of that will move up into the Panhandle, so we could see some precipitation breaking out, at least in the southern half of the Panhandle late Monday night and carrying on into Tuesday morning, with some of that moving eastward, probably losing its strength the farther east it goes. Now as we go into Tuesday, we will see the energy moving up into the Dakotas, and the second piece of energy moving over into Texas, and that leaves most of Nebraska between these two systems. So although we'll see some cool temperatures, we're not expecting to see much in the way of significant moisture statewide. Now as we get into Wednesday, that system will start to move its way toward the Great Lakes, and we'll get a slight northwest flow across northeast Nebraska, but more importantly, we'll start to see the ridging building back into the western part of the state. So we're going to rebound in temperatures slightly on Wednesday, but more importantly, as we get into Thursday, we're going to see some very warm conditions redevelop, and then we have this trough moving into the Pacific Northwest that will start to make its way into the central plains as we get into Friday, increasing our precipitation chances. So if we look at the temperature forecast, kind of a roller coaster, warm this weekend, cooling in with that front on Tuesday, and then we see a slight rebound before we cool down once again on Friday with the next system coming in. 8 to 14-day forecast keeps us in the above normal temperatures, and in terms of precipitation, we see pretty much the lower 48 with above normal moisture.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews are available individually on the Market Journal website and through the Market Journal mobile app. They include information on corn and soybean markets, fall nitrogen applications, conducting research on your farm, and dry lotting cows. As always, you can keep up with Market Journal during the week by following us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Next week, Jeff Peterson will analyze grain markets, and we'll look at how consumers perceive antibiotic use on the farm. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.